The knock hit the shelter after midnight, soft and unsure, like someone begging without wanting to be heard. When the door opened, a shaking teen stood in the cold rain, and a scarred dog stepped forward first, planting itself between the boy and the world. No barking, no growling, just a quiet warning: you are not taking him. Inside, the dog watched everything. Every door, every footstep, every hand that moved too fast. It would not lie fully down. It would not let the boy out of its reach. And when morning light exposed the dog's swollen wounds, injuries that looked less like accidents and more like someone had hit it, the shelter worker realized this was not just a runaway kid with a pet. Before we start, please subscribe. When we hit 100,000 subscribers, I'll be buying a dog I truly admire, a Tibetan Mastiff. Let me know in the comment. Do I have bad taste, or is that a solid choice? The shelter sat at the edge of town where the road narrowed and the streetlights grew farther apart, a place most people only noticed when they were already looking for something they had lost. That night, it was quiet in the way small buildings get after midnight, not asleep, but listening, every sound carrying farther than it should. Inside, one woman worked the late shift alone, moving slowly between kennels, clipboard tucked under her arm, shoes barely making a sound on the concrete floor. She heard the knock only because it didn't belong there. It wasn't loud and it wasn't confident. It came again after a pause, softer this time, like someone unsure whether they were allowed to ask for anything at all. When she looked up toward the front door, she expected to see a shadow already retreating, the way it often went with kids who changed their minds too late. Instead, the shadow stayed. When she unlocked the door and opened it partway, the cold slipped in first, followed by the smell of damp pavement and rain that hadn't quite finished falling. The teen stood just outside the threshold, hood pulled low, shoulders drawn inward as if trying to take up less space in the world. His hands were shaking, though whether from cold or something else, she couldn't tell. At his side stood the dog. It was not large in an impressive way, and not small enough to be overlooked. Its body built solid and compact, muscles tight beneath fur that showed the wear of years rather than neglect. One ear carried an old tear along the edge, the kind that never healed perfectly. Its eyes were alert without being wild, tracking the woman carefully, then sliding past her, mapping the room behind her in a single glance. The dog stepped forward before the boy did. It placed itself between him and the open door, not touching him, but close enough that its shoulder brushed the teen's knee when he shifted his weight. There was no growl, no raised hackles, no show of threat. It simply stood there, unmoving, as if this was the line it had chosen and had no intention of crossing it. "I'm sorry," the boy said, voice thin and rushed like he had practiced the words too many times already. "I just need one night, just one. I won't cause trouble." The woman's gaze flicked back to the dog. It did not look at her when the boy spoke. Its focus stayed outward, measuring her movements, her posture, the tone of her breathing, as if deciding whether the space behind her was safe enough to enter. "You can come in," she said gently, opening the door wider. The dog did not move. It waited until the boy took a step first, then another, and only then did it follow, still positioning itself slightly ahead, still blocking the path between him and the rest of the building. As the door closed behind them, the quiet settled again, thicker now, carrying the sound of the dog's steady breathing and the boy's uneven one. Under the fluorescent lights, the dog's age showed more clearly. Scars traced faint lines along one flank, old enough to have softened, but not old enough to be forgotten by the body that carried them. One paw favored the floor just slightly, a habit rather than an injury, as if the dog had learned long ago to move with care. The woman gestured toward the bench by the intake desk, and the boy sat without being asked, shoulders still hunched, eyes fixed on the floor. The dog lowered itself at his feet but remained upright, not resting fully head level, eyes moving constantly. When the woman reached for the clipboard, the dog's head lifted a fraction, tracking the motion, then settled again when her hand returned to her side. "Can you tell me your name?" she asked the boy. He hesitated, glancing down. The dog leaned closer, its side pressing into his leg, grounding him without drawing attention to itself. After a moment, he answered quietly. "And the dog?" she asked. The boy swallowed. "He doesn't really answer to one." The woman nodded, writing slowly, not pressing. She had learned over the years that some things arrived before their names did, and forcing them only made them retreat. She asked where they had come from, and the boy's answer was vague, not dishonest, but incomplete in the way people were when they were still deciding how much of the truth the room could handle. Throughout it all, the dog never relaxed. It did not pace or whine or show fear, but it never lay fully down either, never offered its belly or closed its eyes. It watched every shift of light, every sound in the building, every movement the woman made, as if the night were something that might break back in at any moment. When another door opened farther down the hall, the dog stiffened instantly, stepping forward until its body blocked the boy completely. The reaction was fast, controlled, and practiced, not the panic of an animal acting on instinct, but the response of one that had learned patterns and consequences. "I'm not going to take him from you," the woman said softly, more to the dog than the boy. The dog did not acknowledge the words. It acknowledged the stillness that followed. Eventually, after a long moment where nothing else changed, the dog lowered itself into a partial rest, not sleep, but close enough to signal a decision had been made. For now. The woman led them to a quieter corner of the shelter, away from the kennels that echoed too much, away from the doors that opened without warning. She brought a blanket and placed it on the floor near the wall. The boy sat down slowly, as if unsure whether he was allowed to stay, and the dog settled beside him, close enough that they shared warmth. Only then, with the door closed and the night held back by walls instead of fear, did the dog finally turn its head and look at the boy, not to check on him. Morning came quietly, without announcement, as if the shelter itself understood that sudden sounds were not welcome here. The lights overhead shifted from their night setting to a softer glow, and somewhere down the hall a door opened and closed again, careful not to echo. The boy stirred first, lifting his head slightly from where it rested against the wall, eyes unfocused for a moment as if he had to remember where he was. The dog was already awake. It had not slept in the way people meant when they used the word. Its body had remained still, pressed close to the boy, but its awareness never left the room. Every sound had been catalogued, every change noted. When the boy moved, even slightly, the dog adjusted immediately, not rising, not startling, just shifting enough to stay between him and the rest of the world. The woman returned with a bowl of water and set it down slowly, deliberately, a few steps away. She did not reach for the dog. She did not speak at first. She had learned over years of working in small shelters like this one that trust was not built by insistence but by patience. The dog watched her hands, then her face, then the space behind her, measuring the distance between threat and safety. After a moment, the dog stood and moved to the bowl, placing itself sideways so it could drink without turning its back on the boy. The way it moved was careful, practiced, as if pain had once taught it the cost of being careless. When it finished, it returned immediately to its position, sitting close, shoulder pressed into the boy's leg, grounding him without ceremony. The woman noticed then what she had missed in the dim light the night before. Along the dog's side, beneath fur that had been roughly cleaned but not fully tended, there were wounds. Not fresh enough to be bleeding freely, but not healed either. The edges were swollen, angry, the kind of damage that suggested impact rather than claws or teeth. There was dried blood tangled into the fur near the shoulder and along one hind leg, and when the dog shifted its weight, a faint tremor ran through its body before it steadied again. "May I look?" she asked quietly. The boy tensed. He didn't answer right away. The dog looked up at him instead. Whatever passed between them was silent but decisive. After a moment, the boy nodded. The woman knelt at a respectful distance and reached out slowly, stopping short of contact. The dog did not move away, but it did not relax either. When her fingers finally brushed the fur near the wound, the dog inhaled sharply, then held still, jaw tight, eyes fixed on a spot in the far wall as if bracing itself. "I thought it was from branches," the boy said softly, words tumbling out now that he had started. "Or fences. We went through a lot of places. I cleaned it when I could. I didn't have much." She listened without interrupting, gently parting fur, taking in the shape of the injuries. These were not the marks of running through woods alone. These were not accidents made by undergrowth or wire. She didn't say that out loud. Not yet. She cleaned what she could, warm water, careful pressure. The kind of touch meant to help without demanding gratitude. The dog endured it without sound, body rigid, breath controlled, as if pain was simply another thing to be managed until the task was done. Only when she stepped back did it finally exhale, long and slow, leaning briefly into the boy's leg before resettling. Food came next. The boy ate slowly, distracted, eyes always flicking up when a sound came from deeper in the building. The dog ate even more carefully, pausing between bites, head lifting often and listening. When another staff member arrived for the day shift and voices echoed down the hall, the dog rose instantly, placing itself squarely in front of the boy, muscles tightening. "It's all right," the woman said, holding up a hand to the other staff member. "Just give them a moment." The dog did not respond to reassurance. It responded to space. The rest of the day passed in fragments. Paperwork done quietly. Calls made that did not yet go anywhere. The boy answered questions with honesty but not completeness, like someone who had learned that telling the full story too soon could make things worse instead of better. The dog remained alert through it all, never aggressive, never relaxed, choosing who it allowed close and when. Once, when someone tried to guide the boy to another room just for a minute, the dog reacted instantly. It stepped forward, body blocking, head low, eyes sharp. Not a sound left its throat, but the message was unmistakable. The attempt ended there. They stopped trying after that. By late afternoon, the woman noticed something else. The dog had begun to soften just slightly around the edges. It lay down more fully when the room stayed quiet. Its eyes closed for brief moments before opening again. Not trust yet, but relief. The kind that came when vigilance had held long enough to believe it might not be needed every second. As evening approached, the shelter grew quiet again, shadows lengthening across the floor. The woman brought another blanket, placing it gently over the dog's back. This time, the dog did not stiffen. It accepted the warmth, adjusting its position to keep the boy within reach. Neither of them knew it yet, but the calm they were settling into was temporary. The world they had outrun was already moving again, following threads neither the boy nor the dog could see, drawing closer with every hour. And when it arrived, it would test the one thing the dog had been holding onto since the moment it chose not to let go. The choice to stay. The second night settled over the shelter differently than the first, heavier somehow, as if the quiet had learned what it was protecting and decided not to loosen its grip. The staff moved more softly now, voices kept low without being told, doors eased shut instead of closed. Even the lights seemed dimmer, though nothing had been changed. It was the kind of stillness that made every small sound feel important. The boy sat where he had spent most of the afternoon, back against the wall, knees drawn up, fingers worrying the edge of the blanket without realizing it. He had spoken more as the day went on, but never too much at once. Pieces slipped out in the spaces between questions. Those uniforms had filled his home without warning. Those voices had been loud. Those hands had reached for him before anyone explained what was happening. He never said he had run. He said the dog had moved first. The dog laid beside him, body stretched out now, finally allowing the floor to take its weight, though one eye remained open. Its breathing had slowed, but its awareness had not. Every time someone passed the doorway, its ear twitched. Every time a radio crackled somewhere deeper in the building, its head lifted slightly before settling again. The woman on duty watched this from a distance, not staring, just noticing. She had worked long enough to know the difference between fear and vigilance, and this dog was not afraid. It was working. She approached once more slowly, carrying a small bowl of water refreshed with ice chips to keep it cool. The dog watched her hands, then her face, then the space behind her, the same careful sequence as before. When she set the bowl down, the dog did not move right away. It waited until the boy shifted first, until the environment proved itself unchanged. "You can stay tonight," the woman said quietly, more statement than permission. "We're not moving anyone." The boy nodded, relief flickering across his face so quickly it might have been missed by anyone not looking for it. The dog exhaled, a sound so soft it barely registered, and rested its chin on its paws. Later, when the shelter lights dimmed further and the building settled into its overnight rhythm, the dog finally slept. Not deeply, not without readiness, but enough that its body loosened, enough that the tension along its shoulders eased. The boy leaned against the wall, head tipped back, eyes closed, exhaustion catching up to him in waves. That was when the sound came, not close, not yet. A low hum, distant and steady, bleeding into the quiet from somewhere beyond the parking lot. The dog's head lifted instantly, eyes opening fully, body rising in one smooth motion. It moved closer to the boy, positioning itself the way it always did, shield first, question later. The hum grew louder, layered now with something else. Tires on gravel, doors opening and closing too deliberately to belong to staff. The woman stiffened where she stood, her attention snapping toward the front of the building. Radios crackled. She didn't need to hear the words clearly to understand the shift. The shelter had gone from overlooked to noticed, and noticed was never neutral. The dog stood completely still, muscles tight beneath its fur, eyes fixed on the direction of the entrance. The boy sensed it immediately, breath hitching as he followed the dog's gaze. His hands clenched into the blanket. "They found us," he whispered, more of a statement than fear. The woman approached, slower now, heart pounding despite her efforts to keep her face calm. "No one's doing anything yet," she said softly. "You're safe here." The dog did not respond to the reassurance. It responded to proximity. As voices carried faintly through the front of the shelter, the dog stepped closer to the boy, lowering its body, making itself a barrier. It did not bark. It did not growl. It did not show teeth. Its restraint was almost unsettling, the kind that came from discipline rather than instinct. A knock sounded at the front door, not loud, not aggressive, just firm. The woman held up a hand, signaling the other staff to stay back. She took a breath, feeling the weight of what she was about to open the door to, and moved toward the entrance. Behind her, the dog shifted, placing itself fully between the boy and the rest of the room. When one of the staff members took a step forward without thinking, the dog's head snapped toward them, eyes sharp, body tense. The message landed immediately. The staff member stopped. "Easy," the woman murmured, not as a command but as acknowledgement. The dog did not relax. Whatever was coming through that door was not new to it. It recognized the pattern too well. Lights, voices, separation disguised as procedure. The boy's breathing had gone shallow now, shoulders drawn tight, but he did not move away. He trusted the dog's position more than he trusted the room, but outside, another vehicle arrived, the sound unmistakable this time. The woman reached the door and paused, hand resting on the handle, giving herself one last second of stillness before opening it. She looked back once, taking in the sight of the two figures on the floor, one small and shaking, the other steady and unyielding, history written into the lines of its body. She understood then that whatever decisions were about to be made would not be simple, because this was no longer about shelter policy or procedures. The door opened slowly, not with the urgency people expected from uniformed arrivals, but with a careful restraint that suggested everyone on both sides understood how fragile the moment already was. Cool night air slipped inside, carrying the faint smell of rain and pavement. The woman stood just inside the threshold, shoulders squared, eyes level, doing what she could to keep her voice calm before anyone spoke. Two officers stood outside, their posture professional but alert, rain beads clinging to their jackets. Behind them, the muted glow of headlights spilled across the gravel lot, outlining the shape of another vehicle waiting farther back. No sirens, no shouting. Still, the energy shifted the instant they stepped forward. "We're looking for a minor," one of the officers said evenly. "And a dog," The words carried farther into the shelter than intended. Inside, the dog did not move an inch. It had placed itself directly in front of the boy now, body angled outward, stance low and deliberate. It wasn't blocking a path so much as claiming one. Anyone coming through would have to acknowledge it first. The boy stayed where he was, hands pressed flat to the floor beside him, knuckles pale, eyes fixed somewhere just past the dog's shoulder. "He's here," the woman replied. "And so is the dog." The officers exchanged a brief glance, the kind that carried more information than words. One of them stepped inside, careful not to advance too far, his eyes immediately drawn to the pair against the wall. His expression softened for just a second before tightening again, duty settling back into place. "We need to separate them," he said gently. "Just to talk, make sure everyone's safe." The dog's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. It didn't bark. It didn't lunge. Instead, it lowered itself further, muscles tightening beneath its coat, eyes locking onto the officer with a focus so intense it felt like pressure in the room. Its tail went still. Its ears flattened just enough to change the shape of its face. It had made its decision, and it was not flexible. The officer stopped moving. The woman stepped slightly to the side, not to give space, but to make sure she remained visible to both parties. "If you try to pull him away," she said quietly, "you're going to get the opposite of what you want." Another officer entered behind the first, this one older, his gaze slower, more observant. He didn't look at the boy right away. He watched the dog instead, the tension in its body, the way it tracked every shift in weight, every change in breathing. "That's not fear," he said under his breath. "That's training." The words landed like a dropped object. The younger officer frowned. "You think so?" The older one nodded once. "Look at the control, the positioning. It's not reacting, it's managing." The woman felt her chest tighten. She hadn't wanted to name it, but she had felt it all day. This dog wasn't guessing. It was choosing. "We're not taking him apart like this," the older officer said, louder now. "Not yet." The boy's breath caught a quiet sound, but he didn't move. The dog shifted just enough to press closer, shoulder brushing the boy's knee, grounding him. The contact seemed to steady them both. "What happened at your home?" the older officer asked, his voice lower, directed at the boy but angled so it didn't feel like an interrogation. The boy swallowed. His voice came out thin but steady. "They came fast," he said. "They said they needed me to answer questions. They didn't say why. He didn't like it." The dog's ears twitched at the sound of the boy's voice, attention flicking back to him briefly before returning to the officers. "Who is he?" the officer asked, though he already knew the answer. "My dog," the boy said. "He stayed when the others didn't." The room fell quiet. The older officer straightened slightly, hands resting open at his sides. "We're not here to hurt you," he said carefully. "But there are people asking questions, serious ones." The dog's eyes did not soften. If anything, they sharpened. "Then ask them here," the woman said, "where he doesn't have to be alone." The suggestion hung in the air, heavy with implication. It wasn't protocol, it wasn't convenient, but it was reasonable in a way that made arguing against it feel wrong. The older officer considered the scene again, the boy pressed to the wall, the dog holding its ground with silent authority, the shelter staff standing back without panic or pressure. Finally, he nodded. "All right," he said. "No separation, not tonight." The dog did not relax immediately. It waited, counted breaths, watched hands. Only when the officers stepped back and lowered themselves slightly, reducing their presence, did its muscles ease by a fraction. The boy let out a shaky breath he had been holding for too long. For the first time since the knock at the door, the shelter felt like a shelter again. But everyone in the room understood the same unspoken truth. Whatever this dog was protecting the boy from, it wasn't over yet. By the time morning settled fully over the shelter, the situation no longer belonged to paperwork or procedure. It belonged to people making quiet decisions they would never write down. The officers returned just after sunrise, not in a rush, not with urgency, but with a different posture than the night before. No radios blared. No questions were asked twice. The older officer came in first, the one who had watched the dog closely from the beginning, the one who understood that force would not work here. He knelt not in front of the boy but to the side, far enough away that the dog did not stiffen. He spoke calmly, without authority in his voice. "We're not logging this," he said. "Not the way it usually goes." The woman from the shelter didn't respond right away. She waited, reading his face the same way she had learned to read frightened animals over the years. He met her gaze and nodded once, slow and certain. "This stays quiet," he continued. "No reports that point back here, no transfers, no separation." The boy looked up then, confusion crossing his face, but the dog did not move. It stayed exactly where it was, pressed against the boy's legs, eyes open but relaxed, as if it already knew the outcome before anyone said it aloud. The officer turned his attention to the boy. "You're not in trouble," he said. "And neither is your dog," the boy swallowed. "What happens now?" The answer did not come from the shelter staff, it came from the officer himself. "I'll take you with me," he said simply. "Both of you." The room went silent. The dog lifted its head just slightly, eyes locking onto the officer's face. It didn't growl. It didn't bare its teeth. It studied him the way it had studied everyone else, measuring intention, searching for cracks. Whatever it saw, there was enough. It stayed where it was. "I've got a place," the officer continued. "Quiet, off the main road. You'll be safe there. No names, no questions you don't want to answer. We let things cool down before anyone else even knows where to look." The shelter woman felt something loosen in her chest. Not relief exactly, but recognition. This was not protocol. This was protection. She nodded. "That's the right call." The officer stood slowly, giving the dog time to adjust to the movement. "We'll move carefully," he said. "No rush." The boy hesitated, then reached down, fingers threading gently into the fur at the dog's neck. The dog leaned into the touch, grounding itself, grounding him. When they finally stood together, the dog stepped forward first, placing its body between the boy and the door out of habit, not fear. Outside, the morning air felt different, cleaner. Quieter, the patrol car waited at the edge of the lot, unmarked this time. The officer opened the back door, then paused. "The front seat's fine," he said. "Both of you." The dog climbed in without being asked, settling on the floor near the boy's feet, close enough to feel every movement. The boy followed, shoulders tense at first, then easing as the door closed without a sound that felt final. As they drove away, no one waved. No one took photos. The shelter returned to its quiet routines, bowls washed, lights adjusted, the night already beginning to feel like something that had happened in another life. The road stretched ahead, empty and ordinary. At a stoplight, the officer glanced back. The boy stared out the window, watching the world pass as if seeing it for the first time. The dog sat upright now, alert but calm, posture loose, no longer guarding every breath. "You did good," the officer said, not loudly, not formally. The dog didn't react, not outwardly. But its tail moved once, slow and sure. They were off the books now, no case file. No intake number. No label that could be used to pull them apart later. But now they had found a home. Just a boy who had nowhere left to run, and a dog who had decided, once and for all, that this time it would not let go.